Perfect. Thanks everybody for joining. We're going to try to make this a little bit fun. Had the silly idea to make this a little bit of a family feud. Go around and hit the top answers on the board for what really is driving home reactivation for folks these days. Thanks to those of you who filled out the survey online and helped provide the information for today. For those of you who didn't, no problem. We'll look to you for answers in the chat and getting involved that way. Anybody has any questions or thoughts, feel free to chime in. There's going to be a lot of people on the call today, so we'll make it work. If we need to schedule another follow-up, we're never against that. So really excited to knock this out. It'll be very little of me, I promise, so that's a win for everybody. We're going to kind of go around the horn and get thoughts from a number of folks. We've got a big group. We're going to have a few points throughout the presentation today where we're going to ask a question. Jump into the chat, go ahead and throw your answers in there. We're going to aggregate those. We're going to bring those together and share those with everybody after the call. And we may even call out a few of the things that we see in the chat as we go through. And also take the opportunity to break out with your Anteriad family or Anteriad team after the call to talk about anything specific. If you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you've seen other things working, feel free to call those out. What you're going to see today is a lot of things that have some overlap. And that's kind of the point of all of this, in that when we're talking about reactivation, we're thinking about one set of customers and contacts, but we're thinking about how we can touch them everywhere that they're at, how we can impact their next buying decision. And so a lot of the things we'll talk about today work really well partnered with one another. And so you'll see some of that kind of come out as we go through it. So without further ado, I was told I had to have this in here, so okay. Whoop. Carmine's happy. He got me in here. I will spare you guys this for very long, but let's dive right in. So we asked 100 marketers, what's your best customer reactivation tactic? We had 7 answers on the board, and we're going to go through each of these 7. So we'll start with number 7.
Scott, are you sharing your screen?
I am not, apparently. It must have gone off. Sorry, hold on one second. Thank you.
That's okay. It did go off. It was on earlier.
Okay, well, hold on one second, everybody. Sorry about that.
So we didn't get to see you as our Family Feud host.
Well, you all really missed out, but I would see my screen now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we might be able to sneak back in and get that picture back in at some point, but I spared you all for now. So first tactic isn't really a tactic in and of itself, but it's what drives everything that we're going to do from here on out, and that's analytics. What is your reactivation pool and why is it important? So I'm going to turn it over to Steph for a deep dive here.
Great, thanks. So anybody who knows me, by the way, I'm Steph Molman here at Anteriad, and anyone who knows me knows that everything for me comes down to graphs and tables with numbers. It is not worth doing unless you can prove why you should do it. And so really at the heart of this, or at the very beginning of this, is why do we care about lapsed buyers? Why do we want to reactivate them? And so this chart is actually from somebody's migration report. This is the house file. And so I've shortened it up a bit by putting all of the lapsed into 13 plus months for this example. But the first 2 bars on the left are the 0 to 12 month customers, and they are broken into prior year non-new customers. So they bought last year, but they also bought sometime in the past. and then prior year new. So they bought last year, but they were brand new to the file. And the reason I break them out that way is because they retain very differently. And then we have acquisition, that is 100%. They were new to the file last year. And then our lapsed group, the 13 plus month group, what this really illustrates is how large of an opportunity we have. So there are 54,378 sites in this pool to be reactivated. We reactivated 5,000 of them. On a table that's going to pop up on the right-hand side, we can actually see the numbers associated with these in terms of the total revenue and the response rate. This is a 12-month response rate. So the reactivation rate last year was 9.4% of people who hadn't bought in a year or more. Now, on the next couple of bullets, what we want to do is do some what if scenarios on this. And if we can reactivate just 1% more of that pool, they spend on average, in this real life example, they spend on average $1,270 when they do reactivate. If we can get just 1% more of them to buy, which is 543 customers, that will generate $691,000 in revenue. What's also really important about that is that that additional 1% or 540 customers, they're going to be more likely to retain the following year. And if they retain at the prior year non-new rate, they're actually going to generate $914,000 the year after that. And if you can double that, if you can increase the reactivation rate by 2%, you double those numbers. So you can really quickly see how these numbers can get very big very quickly. And this is a great way to, in a fairly straightforward way, fairly simple way, to show executives and leadership on the team that if we can get some funding to test these things and prove out the value, then this has just a huge impact on our top line and bottom line, not only this year, but the subsequent years after that. And it becomes, when your file is declining, it gets hard to get out of that spiral down. But the reverse is true as well. When you're on an upswing and really focused on going in and mining your lapsed buyer pool, it's actually then works the same way going up. As you get more people to buy, they more likely are to repeat purchase, and it goes on and on. So one thing I want everybody to kind of think about as we move on to the really start to deep dive into the tactics to do this is, so in this example, I'm using 13 plus month as the cutoff, that if you haven't bought in the last 12 months, we consider you a lapsed buyer. Based on what you're selling, your lapsed time frame might be a little different. Maybe you think of your active buyer file as being 0 to 24 month, and anything past 24 months is lapsed. Or maybe you're selling consumables that people are churning through very rapidly, like office supplies or something like that, and you see lapsed as being at the 6-month mark if they haven't made a purchase in 6 months. So if you know what that is, if you're comfortable sharing it, we'd love it if you could put in the chat box in Teams here what your cutoff is for identifying lapsed buyers.
And Steph, one quick question. I've heard you say a bunch of times that it's really hard to move a retention rate, that it's a real challenge to change your retention rate, but a reactivation rate, easier to change?
Absolutely easier to change. In my experience over many, many years of doing this, the reason the retention rate is hard to move is because you are absolutely, for the most part, you are actively marketing to your retained active buyer file. You are probably sending them direct mail, may or may not be. You are very likely emailing them on a very regular basis. And what happens is over time, they perform less and less and less as you go deeper into the files. So you cut back the direct mail as you should, and you stop emailing people if they haven't engaged with you. So you're not out in front of them. And so the key is to not necessarily mail or email all 54,000 sites, but to look within there and identify those to cherry pick out of there, those most likely to respond, using other overlay attributes as well as first-party information that you have about them. So it is easier to reactivate than, or to increase, I shouldn't say reactivate, it's easier to increase that rate than it is the retention rates.
Perfect. Thanks.
You bet.
All right. Ready for number 6?
Yay. Hi, I'm Andrea Duffy Cabana. I'm Senior Director of Paid Media at Anteriad. And yeah, today I'm going to be talking about search reactivation. I think this is a really important tactic, and slightly offended it's so low, but I think it really works well with a lot of the other tactics we'll be talking about today. So jumping off of what Steph was saying, as far as, obviously finding that lapsed user rate is really important, right? So that's the first thing you need to do, is really make sure we're segmenting our data. One thing I often see with a lot of our clients right now is that we often will lump a lot of that first party data together, and really making sure we're segmenting and pushing it out at different rates, whether that be the 6-month, 12-month lapsed user, is really important. Also making sure we're utilizing those as well to negate people, so not going after the same people if they've recently purchased. And then moving on to the next thing is search. Oftentimes people think of search as more of the traditional, people type in a word or phrase and get your ad. Here, it's really, don't forget about that Google and Bing have a lot of other ad formats and placements that we could be utilizing here. So the two that I wanted to point out for sure would be display and YouTube, but Google also has things like Discover and Gmail and Maps as well. So now that you have that data, make sure you upload that to your Google Ads, and then we can go after them with different tactics. And why that's important, I also have in that little bullet there on the side, is that remarketing campaigns in Google convert 3 times more likely to convert than a prospecting campaign. So a 3% increase in conversion rates, that's enough to really say this is an area which you should really be funding. But from there, again, with display and video, it's a very highly visual campaign type. So make sure that you're standing out, and make sure that your messaging is, across the board, similar to what you might be pushing out via email or in other tactics as well, to really make sure that that messaging is, standing out, and also making sure that it's making sense across the board. And also, one thing I've noticed a lot with our clients, or clients I've worked with in the past, is that oftentimes a barrier to utilizing these types of things is creative. You may not have a creative team in-house, but right now there are so many AI tools that we can utilize to make a creative, or make variations of creative, to really test that out as well. And then finally, last point is just make sure to experiment on this. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, so make sure that we're testing different offers, different images, frequency caps, and the audiences as well. Like I said, you're segmenting these audiences. It doesn't have to be a set it, forget it segmentation. If you're seeing certain segments of your cycle converting at a higher rate, push more aggressively on that side of things. If not, pull back. And definitely don't forget to look at your bounce rate and engagement rates, especially if you're utilizing Google Ads. The Google Analytics tie-in is very easy, so make sure you're using those metrics to guide you in your decision making. Oh, I think Scott, you're muted.
It's really interesting to see that stat where we go from a normal prospect, and it's 3 times more likely for a remarketing campaign to be successful. I think that's really interesting, because it ties out exactly with the analytics that Steph was just showing, right? This is where we start to see, hey, this stuff makes sense. We're doing the same thing. We just saw you're more likely to get somebody to come back and buy once they've already bought. They're more valuable, they're better. So not only are they more likely to convert, but we know that they're more likely to spend more than a pure prospect, and they're more likely to buy again the following year. So it becomes this really virtuous cycle. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.
All right. On to number 5. Co-op database.
That is me, and I actually remembered to take myself off mute, so that is a win. Hi, everyone. I'm Carmine Viola over here at Anteriad. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Pinnacle. I know many of you are familiar with our Pinnacle co-op database, but for those who aren't, Pinnacle is a membership database where companies provide their transactional data in order to select modeled or even non-modeled records from the database at an upfront lower acquisition cost. I think what has made Pinnacle unique from other co-op databases is that we have always solely focused on business-to-business mailers. And that's consistently given our members who use the base higher average orders, higher lifetime value than some of the other co-ops that are out there. Just a few quick key metrics of Pinnacle. We have about 250 plus participants who contribute, about 10 plus years of transactional product history, which totals about 50 million business product buyers. We have 180 plus job titles and functions within the database. So, excuse my voice, by the way, I'm getting over a cold, but so how can all of this rich data be leveraged to help your reactivation efforts? First and foremost, we'll want to utilize the rich RFM data within Pinnacle, especially recency. Although a customer has not purchased from you in the last 36, 48 months, that doesn't mean that they're not out there buying from other business-to-business merchandise companies. So we can determine if your lapsed customer is active with other companies in a specific time frame, the last 3 months, the last 6 months, etc. And that's a pretty easy win. But what if we can't find that lapsed customer purchasing from other companies in that recent time frame? I think that's actually where Pinnacle can be of most use. If your contact isn't active in the last 12 months, we can find another contact who is. So we take your site that has the older contact and we replace that contact with a contact that we find out there buying within a title that makes sense for you, or even more exciting, within a specific product category. So if we take your active site, replace that old contact with someone who's purchasing, promotional products in the last 12 months, for example. Many different options. I mean, we can even identify some of your high value sites where you don't have a recent contact and then build a model around those contacts, those recent contacts. So a lot to take advantage of given our rich transactional data within Pinnacle.
Carmine, do you see a significant difference in the contact level reactivation and the site level reactivation from a response standpoint or a productivity standpoint?
Definitely, I think you'll find more benefit if we can find that actual contact that was buying from you originally. That's going to be the easiest win and the biggest win. But we've had a lot of success with replacing the contact as well. Obviously, people are moving on from businesses, pretty quickly. So to have the option of finding a new contact at your older site, that's a great value.
And as we just saw, considerably more fruitful again than the pure prospect, if we can.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
So I also wanted to throw a question out there for everyone. Would love for you to share how you're currently distinguishing between a lapsed or a dead business buyer. If there's any tricks that you can share with the group, something you're doing internally, or perhaps something that your Anteriad team is helping you with, we would love to hear it. I'm sure everybody else would as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmine.
Sure.
All right. And Carmine, the originator of the template and the whole idea of Family Feud for today. So he really is the mastermind behind this one.
I'll take the fall for that. Thank you.
I think it's a good thing.
All right, good.
All right, on to number 4, prospect email.
I will take that one, Scott. For those that don't know me, my name's Patrick Butler here with the Anteriad team. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about email prospecting, how we tie it to all of our channel strategies. So, it was interesting when we were together a few weeks ago in Milwaukee. We asked who was doing email prospecting, and looking at the year-over-year numbers, I would say roughly a quarter of the people in the room when we got together in 2022 were probably doing email prospecting. And now I'd say it was probably more about 3/4 a year later. So it's obviously paramount to your overall strategy. And we're seeing a lot of positive influence from email prospecting as well. So, when looking at this, we can still put on our old direct mail hats and use similar strategies to what we're doing and what Carmine was just talking about in the Pinnacle world. But to start, it's all about data quality and data cleansing. So first thing you should consider is, okay, I have these older emails, and how valid do I know these emails are? Both the individual email and the domain could have changed in those recency periods. So, always feel like you can lean on Anteriad to do some engagement and validation of your emails. We can run it through a process so that you understand, yes, is that email still active? And should you be marketing to it, or can it be flagged as inactive? And then we can have kind of a new @inactive opportunity based on that. You should also look to make sure the domains are active and that there hasn't been changes there. We're an example of that where, we moved from being Merit to Anteriad. And so if you have an inactive contact, that's one that you just want to make sure that it looks right. So first step, data quality, making sure that whatever's going out looks good. Second, with email, it is a great way to just test. Test on email. You can test different subject lines to see what your engagement looks like there. You can test different content and different messaging to understand how people respond the best to what you're offering. You can even test, white paper engagement and things of that sort. So always think about ways to utilize email for testing perspective that then can be applied to both digital and direct mail. But you get some real-time insights through email, and so that allows you the opportunity to then drive that into the other channels. The other element with messaging for email to consider is image versus text-based. We talked about that a little bit in Milwaukee as well, but a lot of people getting success from just those text-based emails. So always consider doing both. And once again, email allows you to do a variety of things and get some quick learnings on that. So with email, you should look at it as two ways, both multi-channel and single channel. With multi-channel, you're looking to add some lift to what you're doing on, say, a direct mail piece that goes out. So let's say we have identified those contacts that you want to reactivate a mail, and they have 12-month activity on the Anteriad database. We can then look to identify additional contacts at those locations that you can mail. And so two ways to look at it with reactivation. What are you trying to reactivate? Do you want to reactivate that individual, or do you want to reactivate the site? And those strategies can look a little bit different, but they can work in conjunction as well. So where we have had successes where if you have a reactivation campaign going out direct mail wise, we can then identify emails of new contacts, because you're obviously probably going to be emailing those contacts on your system. But let's look at prospects at those inactive sites and start to talk to them as well. In general, when we run email in conjunction with direct mail, we see about a 30% lift in response rate, and that's huge. So that is really what your goal should be to look at when you have that multi-channel environment. And then last, there's also the opportunity for single channel. So, if you decide, hey, direct mail is too costly for reactivation right now, maybe we focus on email specifically. It can also be that multi-channel experience. But this gets back to that old direct mail philosophy as well. Let's understand your best buyers. Let's understand who's inactive. Let's create some lookalike modeling, some profiling to identify audiences and new contacts at those locations we should be talking to them. And let's send them email as well. So a variety of different options here for us to look at, but really a way to drive revenue and drive reactivation. And the other key with email these days is it doesn't have to be about opens and clicks. It can be about true attribution, and Anteriad can help you with that to, once again, put on that direct mail hat and truly understand we emailed this individual and we were able to tie an order to them. So a lot of different opportunities here. Sorry, looking at our chat here, is the 30% life and response rate typically via the email channel, DM, or a combination of the two? It's a combination of the two. So when we look at, you mailed 100,000 direct mail people and we got a 0.2% response rate there. What we're looking at is for those that we had the opportunity to get email on top of that direct mail, what does that response rate lift look like over those DM only? That answer your question?
Like a 0.2 to a 0.26, right? Like we had 30% incremental.
Correct.
And Pat, I think you've seen this too. Most of the time when we're talking about these email programs, when we get a 30% increase, you called out, email being a low cost opportunity. That 30% increase, we're talking about, 0.06%, right? It's not that much in response rate, but that lift is totally, the cost of the email is totally paid for just by that 30% lift, right?
Yep. Jen, on your question, it can be both ways. I think a lot of them are marketing focused, but you can have kind of that account-based sales feel to your email. You see a lot of that with the text-based emails and taking that approach, kind of a one-on-one nature, versus the marketing emails can be, more content and message driven at times. The other thing to keep in mind is you can overdo it with email. So, sometimes it is about simplifying, making sure that people understand what you're offering and what the call of action is. So, we always say typically you only get someone's attention for 5, maybe 10 seconds in an email. That's how long you have to grab their attention and get them to engage in some form. So you want your emails to be very clean, precise on what you're offering and what that call to action is. The other element with the call to action is it's okay to have multiple call to action, ability to click in multiple places. You don't have to scroll all the way to the bottom to then get to the website that you want to. There's an offer at the top, the middle, and the bottom to click and get more information. And one last thing that I will note, I talked about white papers a little bit. Sometimes our initial feelings with white paper is to have a click for them to download that white paper and to ask for more information at that point. You can lose a lot of people when asking for more information. So with the help of Anteriad, keep in mind that if I click on a white paper and go to download it, we already know that P. Butler at Anteriad received that, and we can back into most of the additional contact information. So don't be too worried about collecting a lot of data at that point. In a lot of cases, we can get back to that data. It's more getting them that download so that they really engage how we want them to.
How about the second part of the question, Patrick, around if they're more marketing style emails, best practice universally for emails is to ensure that people are explicitly opted in to receive marketing emails. So obviously each organization is going to have their own email marketing opted in contact list that they are marketing to on their own.
Yep.
So what's kind of like the value add from Anteriad while still respecting best practice of ensuring opted in contacts?
Great question. Thanks for pointing it out. So ultimately, with opt-ins, we obviously have to be very concerned with them and making sure that we're handling them properly. So with the Anteriad platform, one of the values is we are validating and kind of opting in our records for third-party marketing. So we've kind of gone through that process. We can also help either house the opt-in link and feed that data, or opt-out link, feed that data back over to you, or we can connect it with your platform as well. So if we are deploying an email on your behalf, those emails that we have on our system, we're comfortable with because they've opted in to receive the third party. But as well, we're monitoring all those opt-outs and either feeding those back to you or setting it up so that you get them directly, so that you're just making sure you're doing the best with your marketing.
So essentially, it's extended reach beyond our opted-in email
That's correct.
list from a group of people that have opted into third-party emails.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And Jen, I was just going to jump in really quick to your first part of your question. And this kind of pertains to prospect email as well as any of the channels and strategies we're talking about with your question on sales or marketing. And some of it depends on what you guys are selling and what the offer is. And if you're selling a service, there's gonna be a lot of marketing. You're out there educating the audience about what your product or service can provide to them to make their lives easier or to make them more efficient or more profitable. If you're selling products, lower end products, specifically lower AOV, then it's 100% probably a lot more salesy, but sometimes it's the right balance. And it also might be the cadence of which these touches might be, whether it's email, DM, search, what have you. It's kind of that combination, which is the beauty of what we all do is testing into that. But that's probably that line between selling product, lower AOV versus a full-blown corporate solution, which some of you guys might be offering.
Yep. That's a good point, Steve. And
Thanks,
it
Steve.
allows you the opportunity to do some A/B split testing as well, where you could identify an audience and send them more of the marketing focused. And then a couple weeks later, you flip and you send them a little bit of sales. And then you have two audiences, you do that. And then you do a back end analysis and try to understand, well, did they actually engage differently? Or, did the messaging kind of line? And in the end, they just needed to hear from you. It wasn't as much about how you spoke to them. There's obviously different ways to look at that. And that is where matchback and attribution and email and putting on our direct mail hat has changed what we understand about email.
And I know it can be scary when you haven't sent prospect emails, and we're all very, very careful about who we're emailing and how often and everything. But as Pat said, these are opted in for third-party marketing. And for us, we're always monitoring the deliverability on every email that goes out on behalf of clients that I work with. I'm looking at the deliverability rates because we can't risk our sender scores going down.
Yep.
So very careful about it.
Yeah, and it's something that I was actually going to ask Pat this question before as well was, okay, I'm doing a multi-touch campaign. What's the expectation as far as how many emails can I get to match to postal? And we're always working to get that a higher match rate, but that match rate will never really approach 100% because we want to make sure from an email standpoint that we are not only compliant, but doing things as right and to limit any kind of blowback as much as humanly possible. And so there's a lot of thought put into all of that from both a privacy and simply from a marketing stability and scalability standpoint. So it's always kind of that balancing act. But I mean, if you go and you look at things like canned spam, frankly, if you go back and read canned spam now with where we've evolved to, it's really there to prevent bad actors. And in many cases, we've taken a more rigid approach to our process. Everything that we do here at Anteriad is GDPR compliant because we have practices all over the world. We've decided that we'll go with the most strict kind of regulations and reading of the privacy laws that we can and enact those on our end. And frankly, we still see clients who have enacted more stringent, rules on themselves or far less stringent rules on themselves. So everybody has to play within their own comfort. But I can tell you there are ways to do these things that have proven to be successful and safe for everybody, I guess.
Yep.
All right, on to number 3. Phone. And I know this was a big topic back in Milwaukee, both from a welcome call standpoint and a reactivation standpoint. So I'll kick it over to Aaron for some conversation here. And
Thanks.
guys, keep the questions and comments coming. If you want to jump in, that's great. More conversation is great.
Thanks. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Erin Armstrong with Anteriad, and I am going to walk you through some best practices for using phone to reactivate. First off is the importance of really thoughtfully developing your call list. So you want to prioritize obviously your best accounts at the top, but you can do that with a combination of your data and Anteriad data. We can tell you, look, this site hasn't purchased from you in a while, but we see them actively purchasing. So you know they're out there, they're still live, they're doing business. You can also use, if you haven't done an ICP analysis, talk to us about that, but you can use your ICPs and prioritize those that are worth more to you at the top of the list. And lastly, I would just point out that, was this account a prior member of a subscription plan or a loyalty program? All of that data can also be really helpful for your rep when they're trying to get this site to purchase again. Use incentives and offers. That's like a no-brainer, but a good reminder, do you have current promotions running, or can you create one specifically for these lapsed guys? We haven't seen you in a while. Here's a 20% off offer. Limited time offers create a sense of urgency, get them to make a faster decision, hopefully. And remind them, why did they buy from you in the first place? What's your value prop? Make sure you're still communicating that when you talk to them. When developing your script, it may seem obvious, but I'm going to say it. Take note of time zones and who makes up your customer base. Are they mostly front office folks? Are they going to be there during the day, or are they out on job sites? And you want to adjust your call time appropriately. Ask for feedback. So this is the only channel where you're going to have real-time conversations and feedback. So it can be really valuable to ask them, hey, why did you lapse? Why did you stop buying from us? Is it just price or something else? So leave time. You want to have an organized script, but be flexible so that when they have time to talk with you, you can get that valuable information. Moving on. Let's see. So training your phone reps, they're used to taking live incoming calls, but it's probably worth the time to review what your reactivation strategy is, product knowledge, handling customer objectives. And remember that if this account left because of a negative experience, this is your opportunity to turn it into a positive one. We've all seen those reviews out there. I had a bad experience. This rep went above and beyond. There's an extreme example on the vid, but you get my point. You really want to remind them of, what your brand is all about, make it a positive experience. And if you can convert them to be an advocate for your brand, even better. Measure and adjust, so track your typical metrics like number of calls, dialed, calls completed, conversion rate. But again, this idea that you can get real-time customer feedback is super valuable. You can then compile that data and look for patterns. So if you see that customers have stopped purchasing at a certain time frame, adjust upstream. Should we be reaching out to them sooner to prevent them from dropping into the lapse bucket? And then finally, just a reminder that you can use a multi-channel approach here as well. So these accounts haven't bought from you in a while. You're probably not top of mind. How about sending some emails, validating those obviously, but sending some emails to soften the ground a little bit before you make the calls. And also, if you don't connect on the call, think about maybe sending a text message. Hey, we tried to reach out, didn't connect. Here's 20% off. We've missed you. That can all be really effective in getting these folks to buy from you again. So I have a question for the group. have you tested where to draw the line between active and inactive customers? And if so, how and what did you find out? Put it in the chat and we can converse. Thank you.
And Aaron, is there a point where a phone call doesn't make sense, or is phone call throughout the process, right? We talk about a welcome call, then we talk about reactivation. Can a phone call kind of work at other points in the conversation as well?
Yeah, I think just by looking at your own data and seeing where there's natural fall-offs, if you see a pattern break in their purchase frequency, maybe it's time to catch them earlier. Maybe you have a new product, maybe you have something to communicate. But I think it can work, and I think we don't use it enough, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because to me, the fact that email was such a struggle for a long time and now has proven to be successful as a prospecting tool, especially when we start combining it with other channels and make it part of a bigger program. It's maybe almost more surprising to me that phone is back in vogue, but we see more and more success from people just picking up the phone and calling folks, and have multiple examples even in the last couple of weeks of programs, internal and external, through us and our call team, being able to drive orders right away. People saying, oh yeah, no, I'm still a customer, even though we know they haven't bought in 2 years, and wanting to buy right away. So there's really some traction here. People are actually more likely to pick up their phone at work because they think it's somebody for a job to spend, depending on what they're doing. So yeah, a fascinating kind of development to me. All right. Number 2, we're closing in. Customer email. So we talked about prospect side, but what can you do with the emails that you have on your house? To Jen's earlier point about, I've already got emails opted in on my end. What should I be doing with those?
That's me, Jenny Pickering from Anteriad. And I didn't want to put this in there, but I sort of think about this lapsed customer as a Venn diagram. You have your customer, you have your prospect, and so this lapsed customer is right in between, and they're important, but it's difficult to figure out what they are. So back to Aaron's question, are you able to define who that lapsed customer is? You know, active, lapsed, inactive, or prospect, you know, that's a difficult thing to figure out. So using, you know, going back to Steph's house file migration report, figure out where those lines are set up. And then let's figure out sort of how you want to approach these people. How do you want to re-engage with them? And Patrick and Aaron just said this also, value-added content. Do you want to do an offer? An offer, you know, think about what is the value to get this person back in the mix. Do you want to give them 20% off? And do you want them only to respond to you when you're giving them, you know, a percentage off or dollars off or whatever? So that value-added content, the prior point, bring that in and say, hey, you bought this microscope from us. We haven't heard from you in a while. You know, maybe you need to see the other aspects of what it can do, or maybe here's an update to the firmware that you can use. Stuff like that sort of brings people out. It's important to keep them, you know, to keep you on their radar. You can send a survey. I mean, don't be thirsty about it, but say, hey, what's going on? We haven't heard from you in a while. What can we help you with? Here's 3 questions that'll take 3 minutes to let us know. Great engagement tool. And going back, your contact that bought that microscope or that chair or that, I don't know, coffee maker, maybe they're no longer there. So, we can re-engage by prospecting into that site, try to win that site back. And then let's have fun with this a little bit. Use this marketing. You don't necessarily have to stick with the same channel. If they came in through email, as Erin just was saying, phone is a good thing. If they came in through catalog, phone is a good thing, email's a good thing. You can mix and match. You can check in with an email, say, hey, what's going on? We miss working with you. And then with their last purchase, what they purchased. They purchased that coffee maker a year ago. Presumably you're selling coffee filters, coffee mugs, coffee. Check them in and say, hey, congratulations on your 1-year anniversary. Listen, we can do something else with you. And then always, and this is through customers, this is through lapsed, even through prospects, your new products. They know what you have. They know what you have from the last time they've bought from you. Let's bring them in. Let's show them, hey, here's a coffee maker. We now have whatever, personalized mugs. So Jenny's coffee, do not touch. That could be a mug, but as examples. So don't leave these people sort of floating in between active and trying to, you want to repatriate them into your fold.
And Jenny, I just want to amplify one point you made because I think it was a really good one around high value product buyers. So we talked about looking at people who spent a lot with you, but did they buy a high value product? And do you have a high value product that gets bought quite frequently, right? Your kind of gold standard product that's both expensive and bought with a high level of frequency. It's your label printer system, right? We know that you bought that product. We can talk specifically to it, to your point about a firmware update or an addition or something that could make it better or just a way to use it, a content value add there. That's a really powerful thing. We often think about this as pure dollars and cents, but sometimes there are things that are scalable within the product realm as well.
Right. And, presumably that's something that you'll do with your active customers, but sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes they don't engage. You're sticking that foot in the door before they shut it on you. You're saying, hey, wait, we've got stuff for you.
And even if you try to
that
your customers,
salesman,
only 10 or 15 or 20% may have opened that email when you sent it last time. So sending it again now that they're lapsing, never a bad thing.
Exactly.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
All right. Drum roll, please. Number 1. Yeah, it's still direct mail, but important nonetheless, and really drives a lot for many of you on the phone.
Well, jump in on this one. For those that don't know me, Steve Bonafide here at Anteriad. And yes, this is a big part of this is direct mail. And for most of us on this call, direct mail is still a very important cog in the overall puzzle of what we're trying to do here with regard to reactivation, as well as retention and new customer acquisition. With that said, a big part of also what I want to talk about is the data behind it that drives whether it's DM, TM, email, online, digital, whatever. So, part of this reactivation approach is all about what is one of our biggest challenges? How do we reduce or limit the leaky bucket? As marketers, we all know it's going to be easier to retain or reactivate an active customer than it is to convert to a new to file customer. Clearly, new to files are vital to the health of your customer files, but efficient reactivation is key. So in listening so far, obviously, from Get in Front Milwaukee to everything today across all these different strategies, the key element or common denominator to all of these strategies is data. The data should drive your multi-channel or omni-channel approach. So part of what this data is everything we have within our Anteriad databases. And it's very important as you look back into your dormant, inactive customers, wherever that threshold might be. We've talked about that all day here, is if you're selling highly consumable products, an inactive customer might be 13 plus month. As you sell less consumable products, furniture, bigger items, that could be 25 plus, 37 plus, 60 plus. But whatever that might be, it's important to understand who that former customer, inactive customer, dormant customer is. Is it a true business? Is it a SOHO? Is it a non-business? And that's very important to efficiency. You've got to draw a line at some point with understanding whether I want to try harder to get them back. If it's a non-business with a very low lifetime value, your effort is going to be probably reduced significantly. And certainly you might move that sliding scale of how hard or how much you're willing to invest to try to get them back, depending on what they look like. If they're a non-business, probably your threshold or that line is going to be pretty narrow and pretty short in terms of depth of recency. As you get into SOHOs or legitimate businesses, suddenly that threshold gets much broader. You have to understand that, hey, this is a business that might be within our core audience. Aaron mentioned earlier, and certainly Steph with ICPs, if it fits into an ideal customer profile, it fits into the ideal market, it's of a certain size, you're certainly willing to spend more to go after and get them back. So these are all important elements of using the data, all of which that is at our fingertips in our databases. And certainly the size of it as well kind of fits right into the same conversation, being whether it's a small company, size, and or large. Your willingness to spend more to reacquire them, so to speak, or reactivate them is going to be much greater, a larger opportunity that organization presents. Then the other big piece of this, as again, with the theme of data, is one of the most important elements of reactivation is leveraging third-party data. We all know you guys have your own RFM. When you're a recent buyer, whatever that may be, whether it's, again, 12, 24 months, you can rely on that based on what they bought from you and how recently they purchased. However, once they get dormant, the further and further away they get from their last purchase with you, it's vital to understand the third-party point of view. Understanding, okay, so what am I referring to? We can help understand that site, and we've mentioned it several times today. Are they still buying out there? So we're going to look at that inactive customer view. Okay, we know they're not buying with you, but are they buying elsewhere? And we can see that very clearly across our kind of Anteriad B2B database view, even in the last, whether it may be last 24 months, 12 months, and then get tighter as well. So these are all very, very important elements of quote unquote activity in the B2B world that we can present and provide and layer it on top of your inactives. We've talked about this second to last bullet several times today. Certainly, we'll first look and see, hey, can we find that individual still active in the base elsewhere or in our point of view, in our lens? If it's not, then is that site still active? We see where we've been over the last several years. Company and corporate attrition is significant. So that great buyer that you used to have suddenly moves on to either a different role or a different company. You've lost that. So the value of adding an additional contact or finding a new contact at that inactive site is extremely important. And that could be with email, direct mail, phone, or digital. And then certainly that last bullet, should not be overlooked. At some point when they're deep inactive to you guys and to your own customer base, and we don't see activity from them from our third party point of view, then it's time to focus elsewhere. At some point, you just cut bait and say, hey, they haven't bought from us in a while. They don't fit a lot of the criteria. Maybe it's outside of our ICP, and we don't see activity from them anywhere else across our database views. Then it's time to focus and reinvest that marketing spend elsewhere. So again, just tying it all together, it's really so much driven by the data that we can bring to the table. And I also just wanted to also tie in messaging. That's also been a common theme across all the different strategies so far. It's important. Test with it, play with it. We want you back. Where have you been? We haven't seen you in a while. These are all different little messaging that can be on a cover of a DM or within bodies of emails or any of the other tactics we've talked about so far. So any questions or?
Thanks, Steve. So, all right, we've got our 7 tactics up here. Okay, direct mail got the most votes, but should we really put our money there? Where do we place the most value? What's the most effective? And the reality is, it's not just one. It's kind of all of them. And it's different for every company. There's different ways to engage people. There's different people who are going to engage differently with you. Different customers will engage different ways. But being able to use these things collaboratively is proven to be the most successful. And there are tried and true ways of doing it. So quickly, with the last couple of minutes that we have, just a model for how all this stuff can come together. So to Steve's point, data is at the core of all of this. So let's take our data combined with your data. Let's identify those lapsed contacts and sites. Let's not just use that RFM data. Let's use overlay data to understand who are the right people to talk to who are going to have that downstream value, that are going to be likely to reactivate. Then let's put them through audience engagement, right? Our traditional marketing channels, direct mail, email, search. Let's use them in concert. Let's engage those targets. From there, we can start to say, hey, here are the people who are interacting with us, and we can score them. We can say, hey, not only have we scored highly based on our data, but now they've scored highly because they're engaging with your content. And some of those folks are just going to transact naturally. That's the dream, right? We've done marketing, we get a transaction. But for those people that still are out there, we know they're active, we know they've engaged with your content, but they haven't bought. What can we do with them? Well, some of them we can push to a nurture series where they continue to get content, whether that's an email or direct mail. They're going to continue to be available for search. We're going to continue to talk to them. Some other folks, the higher scoring folks, can be handed off to that sales team internally or a BDR with Binza and Anteriad. And we can make those phone calls. We can target those folks specifically, find the right buyer. Maybe we know the right site, but we don't know the right person who's making that purchase decision anymore. We make those phone calls. We start to drive those orders. And those are going to start to spawn transactions themselves. Some of those that don't are going to still be marketing qualified leads. We're going to know that person's active. We're going to know they're there. We're going to continue to nurture them. So now we've kind of built a whole ecosystem where all the channels are working together, where we're building more understanding about our customer. And here's maybe the most important part, and the one part we haven't talked about today. You know what the best lapsed customer is? One that never lapses. And so what we really need to start thinking about is when we get that transaction, retention has to begin immediately. And so some of that is sending those transactions back to your CSR or a BDR for a new customer welcome call, taking additional contacts at those sites and putting them back in the marketing funnel. Let's get a second or third or fourth contact at that site so that it becomes more and more and more sticky. And so it's really just building the infrastructure to do all of this. Before, this was kind of a pipe dream to us in a lot of ways. We had all these channels. We were trying to wrangle all of them. But now the data is there to do it, to be more consistent. We've got methodologies for moving people through. And so it really is all of those channels we've talked about today coming together to drive business long-term. So with that, thank you guys all. We're right at time. We did it. Please do reach out to your teams for, conversation about this, additional questions. We're going to tally up some of the things from chat and share those back with you. We've recorded today's session and we will share that afterwards. And if there are any questions directly, don't hesitate to send an email out right after this call. But thank you all for your time. Everybody who presented today, thank you. And we will see you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
And there you
all.
go.
Thanks, everybody.
You got it.
There it is.
Thank you.
Yay.
Yeah.